All right, welcome back. Today is Tuesday, December 19th, 2023. It's a weekday. It's about 3:30 in the afternoon, and I wanted to come out here and knock out flaring these stainless return lines. Okay, so basically there might be some beginners that are watching. What's a stainless return line? Basically it takes the place of a rubber hose. You have a few options. You have your rubber hose, you have your stainless braided hose, and then you have your hard line or stainless tubing. You can do it in 3/8 or 1/2 inch. This particular stuff right here is 1/2 inch by, I want to say 045. It might be 049. I don't remember. It's definitely 1/2 inch though. Stainless steel, seamless tubing. Now, depending on where you buy this stuff, it's actually cheaper than rubber hoses. Okay, so a return hose, your typical 1-foot return hose is probably $20 plus tax. You can get the stainless braided hose that's probably $30 each, whereas this tubing, depending on where you buy it from, I can get it for about $2 a foot. So $2 plus some tube nuts and sleeves, which are these, are needed. Sleeve, tube nut. These are chrome plated. Okay, so there's your options on the stainless braided. I haven't seen a number 8 JIC stainless braided that isn't a full-size hose. So where I started with this, all these are plumbed. The fittings are tight. There's some minor adjustments that need to be made once these things are in the car to line everything up square, but that doesn't affect the length of the hose here, or the tubing, I should say. Okay, so what's important to note is when you're working on stuff like this, each line is different. You can't get a measurement and bend your line off of that recipe. Well, you can, but you might run into a problem, and the problem is going to be that with all these fittings, all these pipe thread fittings, the fittings might tighten a little more or less, or not go as far in, like this right here. You know, if that doesn't go in as far as this one, or it goes in too far, then the length of your line is going to be different. And these lines need to be made, you know, pretty accurately. So you can see that's pretty accurate, and this is all, you know, eyeballed stuff. You have to excuse me, I've been under the weather here, so that may sound kind of funny. Anyways, what we're going to do now, since I bent them, this is a 180-degree bend, and I haven't flared them. So what I'm going to be doing, I have another video on this somewhere, I think, but I have an Imperial 400F flare tool. I've had this thing probably almost 20 years. It's a flare tool, and it's also a deburring tool in one. And what's important to note is it's 37 degree, not 45. You go to flare these 45, you're gonna have leaks everywhere. It's got to be 37 degree JIC. Okay, so we can get the benders out the way. We're done with these. All right, so we're working with 1/2 inch stainless steel. It's pretty tough stuff. It'll never rust. I'm going to polish these out to appear like chrome, and it's never going to bend. It's never going to leak. It's never going to rust. It's never going to do anything. So the first order of business is to deburr this. So what I do first, it might have a little bit of a, you know, a little bit of burr on it on the outside, is I just zip it with my pneumatic die grinder. Let me do that real quick, bring you guys back. All right, so I got my my ends kind of cleaned up with the pneumatic die grinder. I think it's like 120 grit disc or something, real mild. Okay, so what you got to do first, well, first we're going to deburr. So you put it in this die here. This is, like I say, Imperial 400F. It's my go-to. It's bulletproof, hopefully. You need a vise. This is the deburr. As you can see, it's you know, operated by hand. It doesn't require a wrench. That's how you can tell the difference between a deburr and the actual flare tool. So this thing is slotted for different size tubing. We're using 1/2 inch, so we're going to go for the 1/2 inch slot. It goes all the way down to 1/4 inch maybe. So what you want to do is you want to slide the tubing in. Hopefully this is picking up. And you want to slide the tubing up to the tool. Okay, and then we're going to tighten it. It's 3/4 inch nut on the end here of this die. And then all you're going to do is you tighten this down, and you're just going to spin this by hand. This is the same concept as using a handheld deburr tool. It's just, this is, you know, designed for this tool. You can use a handheld one. Most of the time they come on the cutters, the tubing cutters like this right here. You can use that same thing, same concept. Okay, so give it a few rounds, loosen it, crack this loose. Take the tool out the vise, and then you break it down and you get this out. Right, and we check our deburr. Hopefully, I don't know if the camera's gonna pick that up, but it's nice and clean. There's not any sharp edges on it or anything. So now we're ready for our flare. Now what's important before you flare is, obviously you got to have the collar on and you got to have the tube nut. The tube nut is not that important because you can slide it all the way around the tubing, but the collar doesn't slide all the way around. Collar definitely goes on. That way we're going to open up the tubing and then you won't be able to get the collar on. I said this video might help out some beginners who want to hardline their setup. This, you know, people call it hardline. Okay, this is our flaring tool. They make different versions of this. Rigid has one, but really the little handheld ones don't work on 1/2 inch stainless. They might work on carbon steel, and then you get them chrome plated. What's important to note when you're bending these hard lines with my rigid 1/2 inch bender is you have to allow for the flare. You have to allow this, you know, some room for the flare tool itself. So you have to keep that in mind. You have limitations when whatever tool you're using. The radius of the bend, how thickness the die is, the thickness of the die of the flare tool. You know, all that plays a factor when you're designing your trunk setup. So you slide the collar all the way down as far as it'll go, like that. You slide it in the tool, up to the flare tool. I'm going to bring the camera around here so you can see better. And then we tighten this down. This is important. You want to get it pretty tight. You don't want to, you know, go be Hercules on it and break the tool, but you want to get it tight. Put a little bit of a 3-in-1 oil. You can use motor oil. You can use any type of oil. Hopefully this picks up on camera. So what we want to do is we want to push the tubing up to the tool. Okay, you want to have your tool all the way backed up and the tubing pushed up to the tool. So you can see what I was saying is we're cutting it kind of close here with the radius of our bend. We have, you know, maybe a 1/4 inch to spare before we're going to be maxed out with the tool. So you definitely want to push the tubing up to the tool, and then you're going to start cranking on it. And this thing is going to flare it kind of gradually as it rolls around. Vise could be a little bit tighter. Watch what you're doing with your tool. Okay. Now, an important factor here is the reason why you want to push the tool or the tubing up to the tool is because if you don't, and this thing will bottom out and it'll break that peg right there. If you have an Imperial 400F, and then your tool's toast. You have to buy replacement parts, which I had to do. I know that. Okay, so we're gonna break our tool down. Okay. Now it just collapses. Tubing slides out. Still a little bit of a burr. Sometimes you could use a hand file. I just zip it like that. Push your collar up to it. I can't see if I'm recording or not here. There's your flare. Push your collar up to it. That ain't gonna go past it. Your tube nut goes over that, and where your tube nut is gonna screw into your fitting, it's gonna push that collar up against the fitting. I'll bring you over here, show you a little example. You don't have to go too extreme on the flare. Sometimes if you go too extreme, as you can see, that's going to screw on just right. If you go too extreme, sometimes you're gonna your tube nut won't go around the flare, and it'll have to thread around the flare. You want your tube nut to be able to slide real easy over it like that. Okay, so let's do that one more time here. Let me check the battery. Let me get the tool set up and I'll bring you guys right back. All right, so we're back. I got the camera on my chest here for the people in the back. So what we're gonna do now is just deburr. Okay, you tighten this right here and you spin it, and you do that a few times. Kind of like the process when you cut the tubing. You know, you turn it in, you give it a couple rounds. Turn it in, give it a couple rounds until, you know, it spins pretty freely, which that's probably pretty good right there. And then we're gonna crack the tool loose. Take it out the vise. This collapses on itself like that. You get the whole thing out. Okay. Now we're ready to flare. See how that works? Collapses on itself and the dies move. Okay, now we're ready to flare our 1/2 inch seamless stainless tubing. Remember, big issue, you gotta have the collar and the tube nut on, okay? We're gonna put our flare tool, we wanna back it all the way out. Okay, like that. We're gonna drop some lube. We're going to put our tubing in the tool, and we're going to put the tubing up to the tool as far as it'll go, just like that. Tighten this in. What this is doing is it's crimping on the tubing so the tubing won't slide down when you're trying to flare, because flaring 1/2 inch stainless isn't exactly easy. So you gotta have a good tool. This tool right here, Imperial 400F, is like $400. Like I said, I've had the thing almost 20 years. I did have to replace some parts on user error. So I don't know if that's recording the flare process here. Okay. Tighten this vise down a little bit. It's kind of loose on this wooden table, but it's kind of chilly outside. I won't go outside to the outside vise. There you go. It's got a little bit of a bite to it. Good. Hopefully this thing fits on just like it was. Okay, now you shouldn't have to put any pressure on the tubing. Sometimes you do, sometimes you got to make it fit, but ideally you want it to be able to just collapse off with ease. Okay. Nothing's in a bind. There we go. Like I say, there's room for adjustments. You can tweak it a little bit. Once it's in the car, we can make our fine-tuning adjustments. But that's two tubings, or two returns down. These two. I'm going to go ahead and do these two off camera. Bring you guys back, show you the finished product. All right, fellas, so that's a wrap for this video on hardlining the returns. So the pumps are pretty much plumbed. Some key takeaway notes from this video is you don't have to flare them. You can buy compression fittings where all you have to do is bend the line, you stuff the line in the fitting, and you tighten down on it. That would save you a lot of money on buying a flare tool. But the compression fittings are probably stainless, are probably $8 to $12 a piece. Depending on how many pumps you have, you know, you can get to spending, you know, $200 in compression fittings. You also don't have to do 1/2 inch. You can do 3/8. 3/8 is a lot easier to bend. It's cheaper. I wouldn't say it's easier to flare. It's just easier to work with. You can account for a tighter radius on the tubing. 3/8 is just easier to work with. To me, it doesn't look as good. It serves the same exact purpose. I personally like 1/2 inch stuff. Just looks more beefier. You don't have to go stainless. You can go carbon steel. Then you can powder coat them. You can paint them. You can chrome plate them. You can copper plate them, gold plate them, whatever you want to do after that. Stainless steel, I'm going to polish these up on the buffer, probably do a little bit of sanding and polish them up on the buffer. And you know, with the aluminum and the chrome plating stuff and the stainless, it's all going to kind of reflect off itself, and you're really not going to be able to tell a difference where one stops and the other starts. Right now everything is tight and plumbed. Once it's in the trunk, then we can do some minor adjustments, try and square up the slowdowns and the fittings, and you know, minor tweaking to make it look nicer. But that's pretty much it. It's really simple. Like I say, Imperial 400F is the flare tool, and it was expensive, but I bought it 20 years ago, and I've probably done at least 10 to 12 setups with it, so it's paid for itself. You can always buy it and then use it and then sell it if you don't break it. But that's pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I'll give you a quick walk around of the setup here. Yeah, I don't know why the camera keeps cutting off, but give you a quick walk around of the setup here and explain what's going on with it. I haven't figured out how I'm going to configure it in the trunk, if I want 1, 2, 3, 4 or 2 and 2 or angled, or I mean, we can go, you know, any way we want really. So let me give you a quick walk around here of the setup, show you what it is. It's got the polished motor end caps, regular motor, polished gear, Stucci 1/2 inch check valve, Blackmagic Mini Monsters painted candle, Parker 1/2 inch faucet slowdown chrome plated, 1/2 inch tubing, painted tank. On the rear I'm running accumulators. Those are painted as well. These are high DAC accumulators, 300 PSI. and of course tee off to go to the cylinder. So it's a 4-pump setup. Like I say, I haven't really got that far on how I want to configure it in the trunk, but you know, the possibilities are endless. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is probably going to be it for the setup until we actually start installing it. But the hard lines are bent 180 and they are flared and they're in place. So hope you guys enjoyed this little video. Y'all stay tuned for more work, and thanks for watching.